Welcome to TuesdayNightTakeover.com, your ultimate guide to EDH, CEDH, and the Eternal formats. Check out the site for our Brewed EDH decks, Brewed CEDH decks, and primers for all the decks featured in our videos. Check out the articles we wrote about Bug Midrange and Prison Chops. Links to both of these will be in the description below. Also check us out for new EDH content daily, and new Modern, Legacy, and Vintage content weekly. We also have a Twitter which will be linked in the description below, so please follow us there if you enjoyed. Bug Midrange is one of the best decks in the Vintage format. It's an ultra-efficient midrange deck that is packing counters, creatures, and a ton of ways to interact. Some of the key highlight cards in the deck, and for the Vintage format, are the main deck Artifact Hate that gets played. Bug Midrange does not need to rely on Artifact mana to cast their creatures because most of them are cheap and easy to cast. Typically, we can just cast all of them through our land base. Collector Ophi and Force of Vigor in the main deck is something that's a little unexpected. Not a ton of Vintage decks do that, but the reason Bug Midrange does that is because it's easy to beat Artifact decks when you can stop them on the first turn of the game. Bug Midrange's sideboard is also packing a ton of hate, specifically a lot of hate for Dredge, and even more Artifact hate with an extra copy of Force of Vigor and an extra copy of Energy Flux. Overall, I think that Bug Midrange is an extremely well-positioned deck, and there's a reason that it accounts for a decent amount of the meta in Vintage. Prison Chops is a very, very popular deck in Vintage. The Shops archetype has been around for as long as Vintage has been around. A lot of the stacks pieces are very old, although it has gotten better with time. Prison Chops is really, really well positioned against Storm or any kind of spell pile decks. It does typically struggle against some creature decks because there's not, we're not packing a card like Ensnaring Bridge, but while those matchups are difficult, they are by certainly no means unwinnable. We typically close out games by utilizing Golos or Karn the Great Creator to grab our Wormcoil Engine from the sideboard. We also can copy any type of pesky creatures with Phyrexian Metamorph, and we attack well with Lodestone Golem. The best part about the deck is probably its cheap mana cost, allowing for us to cast spells pretty early. It's very typical for games to have, 4 to 5 mana on turn 1. One of the downsides of the deck is that we don't play any kind of counters. We don't have Force of Will. We're in every way a colorless deck. So while we can make a lot of mana, we don't have many ways to draw cards. So it can feel sometimes once you get stopped in your tracks. For our sideboard, we're packing a lot more hate against Storm and other kind of spell pile decks, as well as some Dredge hate. One of the biggest weaknesses I think of Prison Chops against any creature deck is that we play 3 Null Rods in the main deck. Now, Null Rod is obviously great in any type of mirror match, but in any match that they're not playing a lot of artifacts, it can sometimes feel dead, and a lot of times it's not worth it to cast Null Rod to nullify 1 or 2 Moxes of your opponent, or a Lotus, and then kind of screw over yourself. Overall, Prison Chops is one of the most popular decks in the Vintage format, and it is a ton of fun to play. Alright, let's get into the games here. We are just shuffling up and getting ready to roll here. So, just for sake of knowing, the black sleeves is Big Doinks, and he is playing Prison Chops, and the pink sleeves is Varder, and he is playing Bug Midrange. So, the customary shuffle it up for each opponent, shuffle each other's decks, you know how it goes. And we'll slowly start getting into it here. So I do think that Bug Midrange has a distinct advantage with the main deck Collector's Ophis. I think that's going to have a big impact on these games. So we're all just drawing our hands here. From what I can see, it looks like Big Doinks has a Sphere of Resistance, one of those Null Rods, Urza Saga, Phyrexian Metamorph, and Big Doinks is keeping. Rolls a 6. Varder rolls a 3. Big Doinks goes Ancient Tomb into, Max Sapphire, Sphere of Resistance. Sphere of Resistance gets Force Negation, exiling Narset. Narset is not great in this matchup, so I understand that. Varder goes Bayou. Bayou pass, very simple turn 1 play, nothing too explosive from Bug Midrange. Big Doinks draws a Mishra's Workshop off the top. Wasteland and Urza Saga are the other cards in his hand. Plays an Urza Saga on 1. Havarder untaps, draws. Looks like he drew a Mox of some kind. Yep, that's a Mox Emerald from Havarder. Looks like he's packing a Spell Pierce and looks like a Leovold. Passes to Big Doinks. Urza Saga on 2. Big Doinks plays a Wasteland. 2 activates Urza Saga and creates a Construct token, which is a 2/2. Oh, he does have the dice currently misrepresented. That is a 2/2, folks. Goes down to 16 for his Ancient Tomb. And casts a Sphere of Resistance. Alright, Sphere of Resistance makes it the Construct 3. Oh, end step, Force of Vigor for Havarder. Targeting. Oh, exiling Leovold. It's targeting our Construct and Sphere of Resistance. So that is a big loss for Prison Chops and Big Doinks. That's a tough one. It's kind of left with not that much. So Force of Vigor's all set, and that is definitely a game changer. Havarder starts taking his turn. Just passes, probably likely holding something up. Urza Saga on 3 is gonna Big Doinks is gonna tutor a 0 or 1 and put it onto the battlefield. What's he getting? Pulls a Shadow Spear to the top, but does not put it into play. Oh, and puts a Soul Ring into play. Urza Saga gets sacrificed due to getting its 3rd counter, and the shuffle begins. Just a cut from Havarder this time, no full shuffle for him. Now Big Doinks takes his turn, plays a Mishra's Workshop, Wasteland targeting Bayou, and passes the turn. Very simple turn from Big Doinks, not a lot of action. Havarder just passes back. Big Doinks throws an Urza Saga off the top and plays that straight away. And Big Doinks passes the turn back. Havarder draws a Misty Rainforest, cracks it, going down to 19. Grabbing an Underground Sea for Havarder. So far, it's not been a very explosive game for either player. A lot of kind of, just sitting back, but there has been a lot of interaction so far. Taps Underground Sea, taps Mox Emerald, and casts a Tarmogoyf. That is a big play from Havarder, considering the lack of stuff on the board. It's a 2/3 Goyf. Looks like Big Doinks draws a Mishra's Workshop off the top. Not the best draw, considering we don't have much. Big Doinks taps his Soul Ring and activates Urza's Saga, level 2, and makes a 3/3. Taps Mishra's Workshop, and 2 life. Casts Phyrexian Metamorph, targeting the Construct. So 2 4/4s on now for Big Doinks. That's a big swing in the face of Havarder's Tarmogoyf. Havarder takes his turn, untaps. Plays a Verdant Catacombs. Black-green for Havarder, and Assassin's Trophies, the original Construct. Looking at Big Doinks' list, I believe he is going to fail to find a basic off Assassin's Trophy. Fails to find and just shuffles it up. Havarder goes down to 18 with Verdant Catacombs. Metamorph is down to a 3/3. It did take a Big Doinks a minute to get that actually figured out, but that is the case. Still, I think no real favor of who's in the control of this game. Big Doinks and Havarder both have a decent creature committed to the board. Nothing too crazy going on thus far. Big Doinks untaps, draws, and sets his Urza Saga to 3, and tutors for a 0 or 1 to put onto the battlefield. And grabs Soul Guide Lantern just to counter that Goyf. Wants to see his graveyard, it seems. Looks like he has land, instant, land and instant for Havarder in the graveyard. So, unfortunately, the Soul Guide Lantern does not offer much in the form of stopping any of that or making the Goyf smaller. But that second ability on Soul Guide Lantern will come in handy to take out the Goyf. Havarder just cuts his deck. Saga is sacked. Attacking for 4. Puts Havarder down to 14. Second Mishra's Workshop for Big Doinks. He has been kind of flooding out with his mana. And passes the turn. Tough hand for Big Doinks. He's got 2 Null Rods and a Pithing Needle. 2 things that are not ideal for what he currently has going on. Oh, in response to attacks, taps Soul Guide Lantern and exile Havarder's graveyard, making that Tarmogoyf a 0/1. So take 0 on that one. Yep, and Phyrexian Metamorph does get a little smaller. Taps for Bug, and casts an Oko. And Phyrexian Metamorph is now an Elk. Havarder passes the turn. We draw Karakas off the top. Just a tough hand. Attacks Oko for 3. Now, interestingly, Big Doinks does have the Pithing Needle. He has not named Oko. So, Havarder's 0/1 Goyf and his Oko are still out there. Forest for Havarder. And a second Goyf. Alright, so 2 0/1 Goyfs and an Oko. And passes back to Big Doinks. Big Doinks untaps his Metamorph, draws a card. Draws a Strip Mine, so not a great hand. He's in a no Golos. Interestingly, attacks Havarder for 3. And passes the turn. Green 1/2. Hardcast Force of Vigor. Targeting Metamorph and Soul Ring. And that makes the Tarmogoyfs alive. That is not ideal. That was a big swing of the game for Havarder there with that Force of Vigor hardcast. Attacks for 2, puts Big Doinks down to 12, and pluses Oko and creates a food. Draws a Nettle Cyst off the top. Draws a Nettle Cyst for Big Doinks. That is a good draw. Unfortunately, it's not the best right now, but it does help. Mishra's Workshop Nettle Cyst creates a 2/2. Passes the turn back. Appears he drew an Oko off the top of Havarder. Havarder is absolutely in control of this game at this point. Interestingly, Big Doinks did not cast that Pithing Needle and target Oko. Got the token there, always gotta represent. Havarder did untap his creatures a little late, but he did realize. Plus is Oko and green's another food token. Place there. And just passes the turn back. No attacks. Does not want to attack into that Nettle Cyst. Ghost Quarter drawn for Big Doinks. Oh. Null Rod. It looks like Big Doinks is going to cast out his whole hand to get the Nettle Cyst bigger. Pithing Needle is naming Deathrite Shaman instantly. I'm not sure why Big Doinks wouldn't name Oko, but he names Deathrite Shaman. Maybe to target the first ability. Havarder wants to Spell Pierce the Pithing Needle, which Big Doinks can easily pay. Goes down to 10 with that Ancient Tomb. And has a 5/5 Nettle Cyst against the 2 small Goyfs. Attacks for 5. Now, Havarder is currently at 11. This would put him down to 6. Blocks with 1 Goyf. I assume to get the other Goyf bigger. 2/3 Goyf. And Big Doinks passes the turn after his attack. Havarder draws. Looks like he drew an Oath. Yes, I believe that, yep, Collector Oath was the draw for Havarder. Which is a little redundant with all the Null Rods, but still, the creatures. Big Doinks is quite low on health. Since Big Doinks, interestingly, did not name Oko with the Pithing Needle, he may, I think he's close to alting. I think he's 1 turn away from alting and exchanging control. +1's Oko to 7. Okay, actually he's going to attack first. That makes my Nettle Cyst an Elk. That was a big punt by Big Doinks to not name Deathrite Shaman, or to name Deathrite Shaman with Pithing Needle and not name Oko. Karn the Great Creator is the draw for Big Doinks. Decent card, he could grab maybe a Manticore out of the sideboard, or there's a couple cards, maybe a Wormcoil Engine. Goes down to 6 by tapping his Ancient Tomb. 4 and casts Karn the Great Creator. -2s him and grabs a card from the sideboard. Now I'd expect either Wormcoil or Manticore here. Unfortunately, Big Doinks is in quite a bad position no matter what he draws. Yep, -2s him, and is grabbing a card from his sideboard. An artifact card from his sideboard, that is. Does grab Argenta Masticore. Interesting choice to not grab the Wormcoil there, but I guess he's kind of in a backed up spot anyways. May not want to show his whole sideboard yet. That is a card that definitely comes in game 2. Attacks for 3. Attacks Havarder for 3, going down to 8. It is now Havarder's turn. -5, Alt Oko. And this is game. It was a very big punt by Big Doinks to not target Oko with that Pithing Needle, which is setting him up. Granted, the creature was tapped. He was kind of in a losing position anyways, but overall, he likely should have named Oko with that Pithing Needle. Bad position for Big Doinks here. He's in a lot of trouble. I don't think this game's going to go his way. He did not know Golos. He did not find a lot of his pieces. Swings for 4, and Big Doinks scoops it up. Hey everyone, welcome to game 2. As you saw in the first, Havarder took that 1-0 for sideboarding. Havarder took out Narset, Leovold, one copy of Deathrite Shaman and Hall Breacher, and he brought in his last copy of Force of Vigor, 2 Endurances, and an Energy Flux. Big Doinks took out his 3 main deck copies of Null Rod and brought in both his Masticores and his Wormcoil Engine. So they're getting shuffled up. Let's get right into this here. So, very expected game for game 1. When Prison Shops gets stopped, it definitely has some trouble getting in, like, the steam back, and that's what happened. You know, the multiple counters from Havarder really put the edge towards him. He's got Google going on there. Look at that. He's on the web. As the customary shuffle we got going on here. So, overall, I think Big Doinks is hoping to not see any Ophies in this one and hoping not to see any Force of Vigors. This is definitely a tough matchup for Shops. It's not the easiest, and we really need a strong Nettle Cyst or Golos turn 1 or 2 start to kind of get the W. But let's see what we got going on here. Okay. Looks like I see a Goif, a Mox Sapphire, and a Snapcaster for Havarder, and a Masticore and a Karn and a bunch of lands for Big Doinks, who is mulliganing to 6. And Havarder mulligans to 6 as well. So, more shuffling. Yeah, I think I agree with both players not keeping those. Those were hands that are kind of do-nothing hands, and, you know, Havarder is in a better spot with the cards he plays, but I think that Big Doinks kind of has to mull till he can get something good. I think mulling down to 4 or below is kind of a death sentence, but I think if he can keep it above 5, he'll be good. Overall, I think that, you know, this is an uphill battle for him either way, so. But more shuffling and shuffling as they mull to 6. All right. Big Doinks draws his 7, putting 1 back if he does decide to keep it. We see a Workshop, an Ancient Tomb, Inventor's Fair, Metamorph, Tabernacle, and that is not a great hand. Havarder has a decent 6. He has Ophi in his hand, he has Force of Will, and a target, and a Mox. I think Havarder keeps. A Spell Pierce there. Yeah, I think Havarder has a decent hand against Prison Shops. Big Doinks going down to 5 is not ideal. So Havarder is keeping his 6 as Big Doinks goes down to 5. Alright, let's see what he's got for his 5. Ancient Tomb, Shadow Spear, Sphere of Resistance, one of the Moxen, puts back Shadow Spear and one of the Moxes, it appears, and starts it off. Mox Emerald for Big Doinks, Mox Pearl for Big Doinks, Ancient Tomb, and kind of ran out of steam there. Unfortunate that he had a mull to 5 and just passes it over. Havarder goes with Bayou into Mox Emerald, Mox Jet, and here is one of the things we don't want to see if we're Big Doinks. 2 mana, oof. That really hurts the game plan. Not only is the mull to 5 devastating, the Collector Oof on turn 1 is not helping. Mox Ruby the draw for Big Doinks, and Shit kind of puts his hand up and just throws it to his opponent. The thing is, it's even if we have a way to remove the Collector Ophi, Big Doinks still has to contend with the Force of Will with a valid target, so would need at least 2 ways to do it. Havarder attacks with Collector Oof and hits him for down to 18. Passes the turn. Big Doinks draws Sphere of Resistance. Taps the Ancient Tomb down to 16 and casts Sphere. Now Havarder might want to counter this. And does Force of Will it, pitching Ancestral Recall. That puts him down to 19. And now it's Havarder's turn again. And attacks for 2 down to 16 for Big Doinks. Big Doinks draws an Urza Saga off the top. is nice, but will not get him that closer to Golos with that oof on the battlefield. Time Walk is drawn by Havarder. Puts Big Doinks to 14 with Collector Oof attack. Draws Black Lotus off the top. This is a disastrous game for Big Doinks. He's really behind the 8-ball, and I don't think he can win. Plays Lotus and passes. 4 artifacts, just unable to do anything because that's pesky 2-2. Big Doinks taps Ancient Tomb down to 12 and activates Urza's Saga, creating a 5-5. That's a great swing. He can kill the oof and kind of, at least make it so he's not taking damage from attacks. Maybe force Havarder to have a little bit of a different game plan. Oh, but that's a Force of Vigor off the top for Havarder with a Time Walk in hand. That says goodbye to his creature. Let's see what approach Havarder takes here. He is absolutely in control of the game. Attacks for 2, interestingly. Big Doinks blocks, killing his oof. But he was likely doing that to, for Force of Vigor, rather. Looks like I would have to guess Force of Vigor is the cast for Havarder here. Force of Vigor, hard-casted. Oh, not hard-casted, rather. Exiling Endurance. Okay, yep, those are valid targets. Now, Big Doinks can cast Golos next turn, which is a big swing for him. Uh-oh. I see what's in his hand, and that's an Energy Flux. That is devastating. All the hate needed for Havarder has been in this game. Goes down to 10, saving one of the Moxes, saving his Mox Emerald, which draws this card and searches for a 0 or 1. Yeah, this is a really tough spot. I'm surprised Big Doinks hasn't conceded at this point. The aggressiveness with the Oaf was definitely because of Energy Flux in hand for Havarder with no fear of countering. Really nothing he grabs can save him. Grabs a Mana Vault, okay. Loses the Urza Saga. This is very much a tough game for Big Doinks. I think it's pretty close to being over with nothing to cast. Passes the turn. Now Havarder has to pay for his Energy Flux. Decides not to, which is a wise decision. I think he knows this game is pretty much almost won. No enchantment hate for Big Doinks is tough when he comes up against the Energy Flux. Havarder grabs an Underground Sea. What is he building in there? Energy Flux is just, at this point, a death sentence for Big Doinks. Just passes the turn. Goes down to 8 to pay for his Mana Vault, which is more than anything else, just a last-ditch effort. And draws Chalice. Plays his Inventor's Fair. Has what he wanted. If that Oofy or that Energy Flux didn't come down, he did have the Worm Coil, which would have been great. Havarder casts Time Walk, takes an extra turn. On his extra turn, he draws Sylvan Library. And this is just a matter of time. Big Doinks, if he wants to save any of his artifacts, he needs to keep injuring himself with Ancient Tomb. So I think we're going to see the hand come out quite soon. I think this is near the end, but Prison Chops does have a tough matchup against Bug Midrange, so I didn't necessarily expect a 2-0, but I think that Havarder had a lot of the cards he needed. Goes to 6 to pay for the Mana Vault, and throws the hand out. There it is.